In the peaceful village of Macondo, where the air always smelled of ripe mangoes and the sound of children's laughter filled the dusty roads, there lived a woman named Mama Lela. She was known all through the village as a woman of great strength and kindness. Her hands were rough from years of work, and her smile carried both warmth and sadness. Every morning, before the sun had fully risen, she would tie her old wrapper tightly around her waist, balance a basket of fruits on her head, and walk the long path to the market. The fruits she sold were never just fruits. They were her hope, her prayers, and her way of keeping her only son, Tendo, in school. Tendo was her pride and joy. From the moment he was born, she had promised herself that she would give him a better life. She often whispered over him when he was a baby, "My son, you will go far. You will see places your mother never did." People in the village admired her love and sacrifice. They called her the woman with a strong heart because no matter how hard life became, she never complained. Even when she came home tired, with only a few coins left after a long day at the market, she still sang softly while preparing food for her boy. Tendo, as a little boy, loved his mother deeply. He would run to the market after school to help her pack the leftover fruits. They would walk home together, laughing and talking about his school day. Mama Lela always told him stories about his late father, a humble man who had dreamed of seeing his son become educated. "You will finish what he could not," she often said. And Tendo, filled with hope, would nod proudly. But as the years passed and Tendo grew older, things began to change. The world outside Macondo started to call him. He saw boys from wealthier homes wearing neat clothes, carrying fancy bags, and talking about city life. They looked clean and confident, while he wore torn shirts and walked beside his mother's fruit baskets. Slowly, shame began to creep into his heart. He no longer wanted to be seen helping her in the market. When his classmates teased him, calling him the fruit seller's son, his face burned with embarrassment. Mama Lela noticed her son's distance. He no longer smiled as he once did. When she called him to join her at the market, he would sigh or pretend to be busy. One morning, as she prepared to leave, she said softly, "Tendo, my son, will you walk with me today? The basket is heavy." He looked away and said, "I have things to do, Mama. You can ask one of the neighbors." Her heart ached, but she said nothing. She only adjusted her basket and left. In the market, the other women whispered kindly, "Your boy is growing up, Mama Lela. Boys change when they see the world." She nodded with a weak smile, pretending not to feel the sting in her heart. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Tendo began spending more time with friends who spoke of dreams in the city. They told him how the city was full of tall buildings, bright lights, and opportunities. "You cannot live like this forever," one of them said. "Your mother's life is too small for your dreams." Those words sank deep into Tendo's heart. Soon, he began to see his mother not as a blessing, but as a reminder of the poverty he wanted to escape. One evening, as they sat outside their small mud house, Tendo broke his silence. "Mother," he said, his tone sharp, "why must you sell fruits every day? People laugh at me in school. They say I smell of the market." Mama Lela looked at him, her eyes filled with pain and love. "My son," she said quietly, "I do it so you can learn. So you can have the life your father dreamed for you." But Tendo was too angry to listen. "I don't want this kind of life anymore," he said, standing up. "I don't want people to think I am poor." His words were like knives, but Mama Lela only smiled sadly. "One day, you will understand," she whispered. That night, she sat outside under the moonlight, tears glistening on her cheeks. She thought of all the years she had carried him on her back, all the nights she had gone hungry so he could eat, all the dreams she had built around his future. "Still," she said softly to herself, "he is my son, my heart." Tendo began to spend less time at home. When he wasn't at school, he was with his friends near the trading center, talking about the day they would leave Macondo. He no longer waited for his mother in the evenings, nor did he help her with the fruits. Each time she came home from the market, tired and dusty, she found him asleep or pretending not to notice her. Yet Mama Lela's love did not fade. She continued to work harder, saving every coin she could. When she heard about a college in the nearby town, she began dreaming again. "If I can send him there," she told herself, "he will get a good job and his life will change." One evening, as the sun went down, she called Tendo to her side. "My son," she said, "I have been saving money for you. You will go to the town school next year." Tendo looked at her with disbelief. "Really, Mama?" he asked. "Yes," she smiled, her eyes full of hope. "It is not much, but I will work harder." That night, for the first time in months, Tendo hugged his mother. For a brief moment, the bond they once shared returned. But deep inside, the seed of pride had already taken root. He dreamed not of returning to help his mother, but of leaving Macondo forever. And so, while Mama Lela dreamed of a better future together, Tendo dreamed of escaping her world entirely. In the days that followed, Mama Lela continued to work tirelessly. She carried her baskets to the market under the scorching sun, her back aching and her hands sore, but her heart full of purpose. Every coin she earned felt like a step toward her son's dream. Villagers admired her and said, "Mama Lela is truly a strong woman." But even as the village praised her, she felt a small emptiness. Her son's laughter no longer echoed in their home. Still, she whispered to herself each night, "He will understand one day. My love will guide him home." And somewhere in the distance, Tendo was already planning his new life, unaware of how much his mother's heart ached for him, unaware that love like hers could wait forever, even in silence. The evening sun glowed weakly over the village of Macondo, painting the huts in soft orange light. The marketplace had gone quiet, and the sound of distant laughter floated through the dusty road. Inside a small mud house, Mama Lela was sitting on her mat, sorting the few fruits left in her basket. Her hands were tired, her back ached, but her eyes still shone with love. She looked toward the doorway, waiting for her son, Tendo, to return from school. When she finally saw him walking home, tall and proud in his worn uniform, her face lit up with joy. "My son," she called softly, "come, eat something. I kept food for you." But Tendo didn't answer. He walked straight past her, his face dark with anger. He dropped his school bag on the floor and said sharply, "Mother, I am tired of this life." Mama Lela looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean, my son?" she asked gently. He turned to her, his eyes full of frustration. "Everyone at school laughs at me," he said. "They say my mother smells like the market. They say I am the fruit seller's boy. I can't stand it any more." Mama Lela's heart sank. She wanted to hold him, to tell him not to listen, but before she could speak, he shouted, "Stop selling fruits, Mother. People laugh at me because of you." For a moment, the world around her fell silent. The evening wind blew softly through the doorway, carrying the smell of ripe mangoes and dust. Mama Lela's hands trembled as she placed the last fruit back into the basket. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained calm. "My son," she said softly, "this is all I know. This is how I have kept you in school. This is how I give you food." Tendo looked away, his jaw tight. "You don't understand," he muttered. "I want more than this. I want to live like the people in the city, not like this." His words were sharp, cutting through her heart like a blade. But Mama Lela did not fight back. She had learned long ago that anger only built walls. She stood up slowly and said, "One day, you will understand why I do this." That night, Tendo refused to eat. He sat outside under the old tree, staring into the distance, his mind full of dreams far beyond the village. Mama Lela watched him through the window, her tears falling quietly onto the floor. She whispered to herself, "He is growing. But the world is growing inside him too." Days passed, and things between them grew colder. Tendo no longer helped her carry baskets to the market. When she tried to talk to him, he replied with short, impatient answers. He began spending time with boys who had already gone to the city. They returned with nice shirts, shiny shoes, and big stories. They told Tendo how city life was full of opportunity, how people there didn't have to work under the sun or walk barefoot through the dust. "You are too smart to live here," they told him. "Leave this village. Leave the market. Leave your mother if you have to." Their words planted seeds in Tendo's heart, seeds of pride and restlessness. Soon, he stopped seeing his mother's love and sacrifice. All he saw was a simple woman who, to him, belonged to a world too small for his dreams. One afternoon, Mama Lela returned from the market early. The sky had turned gray, and rain was coming. She saw Tendo sitting under the tree, talking to one of his friends. She walked up slowly and said, "My son, help me bring the fruits inside before the rain starts." But Tendo didn't move. He looked at his friend and laughed. "Let her do it," he said quietly. "She's used to it." His friend chuckled, and Mama Lella's heart broke. Still, she said nothing. She carried the heavy basket alone, her thin arms trembling. Later that evening, she sat near the fire, cooking food. The rain poured outside, and thunder rolled across the hills. She looked at Tendo, who sat on his mat, lost in thought. "My son," she said, "when your father died, I promised to give you everything. I know this life is hard, but I do it all for you." Tendo didn't answer. He simply stared at the flames. Finally, he said, "I don't belong here, Mother. I am leaving for the city when school ends." Her hands froze. "The city," she repeated softly. "But you have no one there. How will you live?" He stood up, his voice full of pride. "I will find a way. I can't stay here forever." Mama Lella wanted to tell him the city was not as kind as it looked, that it swallowed people whole and left them lost. But she saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire that once made her believe he could be great. So she said quietly, "If that is your dream, then I will pray for you." Months passed, and true to his word, Tendo left for the city. The day he departed, the whole village gathered to say goodbye. Mama Lella hugged him tightly, her tears soaking his shirt. "Remember where you come from," she whispered. "Remember your mother's love." But Tendo barely nodded. He was already thinking of the tall buildings and busy streets waiting for him. When the bus drove away, Mama Lella stood by the road long after it disappeared from view. The dust settled around her feet, but she didn't move. The villagers watched quietly, their hearts heavy. Days turned into weeks. Then weeks became months. Tendo never wrote. He never called. At first, Mama Lella told herself he was busy, that city life must be keeping him occupied. She waited by the road every evening, hoping to see his tall figure walking toward her. Each day, she prepared his favorite food, just in case he came. But night after night, she ate alone. The villagers began to whisper, "Tendo has forgotten her." Mama Lella smiled whenever she heard it and said, "No, my son will come back. He just needs time." Her faith became her strength. She continued selling fruits in the market, saving little by little, still speaking proudly of her son. "He is in the city," she would say. "He is doing well." But deep inside, she felt the ache of silence. Sometimes, at night, she sat outside her hut, looking at the stars. "Are you looking at the same stars, my son?" she whispered. "Do you still remember me?" The seasons changed. The mango trees bloomed and withered again. Still, there was no letter, no word, no visit. Yet every evening, when the sun dipped low and the road grew quiet, Mama Lella stood by the old road, her heart whispering the same prayer, that one day her boy would return, and the laughter of the market would once again echo through her home. She never stopped believing. The morning sun was soft and golden over Macondo. Birds sang in the trees, and the air was calm, but inside a small mud house at the edge of the village, Mama Lella sat quietly on her mat. Her hands, once strong and busy, now trembled with age. Her hair had turned white, and her back was bent from years of carrying baskets to the market. She no longer sold fruits like before, her legs hurt too much, and her eyesight had grown weak. Still, every morning, she sat outside her home, hoping to see her son walking down the old road again. Years had passed since Tendo had left for the city. The villagers spoke of him often. Some said he had become a great man, working in an office and driving cars that shone like mirrors. Others said he had forgotten his mother completely. But Mama Lella always smiled when she heard his name. "He will come," she would say. "My Tendo will come." Even when the rain washed away her small garden and her roof began to leak, she still believed he would return to fix everything. One hot afternoon, as she sat weaving a small mat by the doorway, a strange sound filled the air, the sound of an engine, loud and powerful. The children playing nearby ran toward the road, shouting, "A car! A car!" It was rare to see a car in Macondo. Dust rose behind it like a cloud as it rolled toward her small house. Mama Lella squinted her eyes, her heart beating faster. She slowly stood up, leaning on her walking stick. When the shiny car stopped, she gasped. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out wearing a clean suit and dark glasses. His shoes sparkled in the sunlight. For a moment, Mama Lella did not recognize him. But when he removed his glasses, her heart leapt. "Tendo!" she cried out, her voice trembling. "My son! You came home!" She tried to walk faster, but her legs were weak. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for him. "Oh, my son, look at you! You have grown so handsome, so strong." Her voice broke with emotion. She wanted to hug him, to feel his warmth, but Tendo only gave a small smile and looked around. His eyes scanned the small house, the broken fence, the empty yard. "Mother," he said flatly, "I came because I heard you are sick. You cannot live like this anymore. I will take you to the city." For a moment, she froze, her smile fading slightly. There was no joy in his voice, no tenderness. But she pushed the thought aside. Her heart was too full of happiness to care. "The city," she whispered. "Oh, my son, you want to take me to the city?" "Yes," Tendo replied, looking at his watch. "You will stay with me for a while. I have things to do, so pack quickly." Mama Lella nodded, her eyes shining with tears. She turned and went inside her little house. Every corner of it held memories. The mat she had woven when Tendo was a boy, the clay pot he once broke while playing, the small wooden box where she kept his childhood drawings. She touched each item gently, whispering, "We are leaving, my son and I. He has come for me." She took out a small bag from under her bed and packed a few clothes, her wrapper, and the old photo of her late husband. She hesitated for a moment, then took a small jar of soil from the garden. It was from the land where her husband was buried, and she wanted to carry it with her. "So he comes with me," she murmured softly. When she stepped outside, the children of the village were gathered, whispering to one another. "Mama Lella's son has come," they said. "Look at his car." Some of the women waved from a distance, smiling. "You see," one said to another, she was right. Her son did not forget her. Mama Lella turned to them, her eyes wet with joy. "He has come for me," she said proudly. "My boy has come." Tendo stood beside the car, looking impatient. He opened the door and said, "Come, mother. We don't have time to waste." She nodded quickly and got in, her heart pounding. As the car began to move, she looked through the window at her small house, her mango tree, and the familiar road. "Goodbye, Macondo," she whispered. "You have kept me safe for so long." The drive to the city felt like a dream. Mama Lella had never been inside a car before. She stared at the trees rushing by, the wide roads, the people walking with heavy loads on their heads. Everything looked new and strange. She wanted to talk to her son, to tell him how proud she was, but he sat quietly, focused on the road, his face serious. At one point, she said softly, "My son, you look tired. Do you still pray before you sleep?" Tendo didn't answer. He only nodded slightly. She smiled, pretending not to notice his silence. "You work too hard," she continued. "But I am glad you thought of your old mother. I will cook for you again, the way I used to when you were small." Tendo sighed and said, "Mother, I have a wife now. Things are different." She nodded again, folding her hands on her lap. "Yes, my son. I understand. I will not be a burden." The car entered the city after many hours. The buildings rose high into the sky, and lights flashed everywhere. The noise of cars and people filled the air. Mama Lella looked around in awe. "So this is the city," she whispered. "It is bigger than I ever imagined." When they reached Tendo's house, she saw walls taller than any she had seen before, painted white and surrounded by flowers. It was beautiful, but it felt cold, too quiet, too clean. A young woman came out to meet them. She wore a nice dress and held a phone in her hand. "This is my wife, Nia," Tendo said. "Mother, this is her house too, so please respect her rules." Nia smiled politely but not warmly. "Welcome, Mama," she said, her tone stiff. Mama Lella smiled brightly in return, saying, "Thank you, my daughter. I am happy to meet you." Inside the house, everything was shiny: glass tables, bright lights, soft chairs. Mama Lella walked slowly, afraid to touch anything. She looked at her son and said quietly, "You have done well for yourself, my boy. Your father would be proud. Tendo nodded but said nothing. You will stay in the back room, he said. It is small, but it's quiet. Mama Lela smiled again, not minding at all. A small room is enough for me, she said softly. I only need a place to rest and thank God for bringing me here. That night, as she lay in her bed, listening to the city sounds, the cars, the voices, the distant music, she smiled in the dark. She thought of the years she had waited, the nights she had cried, the mornings she had prayed. Her son had finally come for her. He had not forgotten. She whispered to herself, he still cares. My Tendo still cares. Then she closed her eyes, her heart full of peace. The city was bright and noisy, full of people who never stopped moving. Cars honked all day, and lights stayed on through the night. To Mama Lela, it felt like another world. Her small room behind her son's big house was quiet and dark, far from the busy street. The walls were thin, and the window was tiny, but she didn't complain. She told herself, at least I am close to my son. Each morning, she woke before sunrise, just as she used to in the village. She swept her small floor, washed her clothes by hand, and cooked porridge on a small stove Tendo had bought for her. Sometimes she would wait by the back door, hoping to see Tendo leave for work so she could wave to him. But most days, he didn't come through that way. He used the front door, where his wife, Nia, always greeted him with a kiss before he left in his shiny car. At first, Nia smiled at Mama Lela, but as days passed, her face grew cold. She didn't like the old woman's village ways. She smells of smoke, Nia said one morning when Tendo was getting ready for work. And she always hums those old songs. It makes the house feel sad. Tendo sighed and said, she is old, Nia. Try to be kind. But Nia frowned. Kind? She sits all day doing nothing. I don't want her near my friends when they visit. They will think we live with a beggar. Tendo didn't answer. He just picked up his bag and left. He didn't want to argue. But slowly, he began to visit his mother less and less. He told himself he was busy with work, that he had meetings, that she would understand. But deep down, he knew he was avoiding her, avoiding the shame he once felt about his poor past. Days turned into weeks. Mama Lela stayed in her little room, watching the sun rise and fall through the small window. She didn't see her son for many days, only hearing his laughter in the house when he came home late. Sometimes, she would leave a small bowl of food by his door, hoping he would notice. But the bowl always came back untouched. One afternoon, she sat on her bed and whispered to herself, he works hard. Maybe he forgets to eat. She smiled weakly and began to pray. God, bless my son. Protect him in this big city. Don't let him lose his way. One day, it began to rain. Not just a light drizzle, but heavy, endless rain that beat down on the city for hours. The sound filled her small room, and water started dripping from the roof. She looked up and saw a small hole. The drops fell faster, landing on her blanket. She stood slowly, her knees shaking, and tried to move the bed. Ah, this roof, she said softly. I will fix it before it gets worse. She found a small stool and climbed on it, trying to press a piece of cloth against the leak. But her hand slipped. The stool wobbled. Before she could steady herself, she fell hard to the floor. Pain shot through her leg, and she cried out. Ah, my leg! My leg! Her voice was weak, drowned by the sound of the rain. No one heard her. The rain fell harder, and she could barely move. She dragged herself to the corner, trembling. Tears filled her eyes. God, please help me, she whispered. The pain was sharp, but worse was the loneliness. She thought of her son, his smile when he was little, his laughter when they sold fruits together. She wished he would open the door and call her name. Hours passed. The rain stopped, but the night stayed cold. She managed to pull a blanket over herself and waited, her leg throbbing with pain. Inside the main house, Nia and Tendo sat in the living room, watching television. Nia frowned as she heard faint noises from outside. I think your mother dropped something again, she said. She keeps moving things around. Tendo didn't look up from his phone. She's fine, he said. She doesn't like to be disturbed. But something in his chest felt heavy. The sound of the rain and the silence afterward made him uneasy. He stood up finally and said, Let me check on her. When he opened the back door, the cool night air rushed in. He saw that the ground was wet and muddy. The door to his mother's room was slightly open. He stepped inside and froze. There she was, lying on the floor, her blanket pulled around her, her leg twisted awkwardly. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. "Mother!" he shouted, running to her. He lifted her gently. "Why didn't you call me?" She looked at him weakly, her lips trembling. "I didn't want to trouble you," she whispered. "You are busy." Tendo felt a sharp pain in his chest. Her voice, soft and forgiving, broke something inside him. He saw the leaking roof, the wet floor, the simple mat she slept on. He realized he had left her in this small room, forgotten, while he enjoyed comfort inside. He called for Nia, who came reluctantly. Together they carried Mama Lella into the main house. They laid her on the couch, and Tendo brought her warm tea. He sat by her side, holding her hand, his eyes filled with tears. "I am sorry, Mother," he said. "I forgot where I came from. I forgot who made me who I am." Mama Lella smiled faintly, touching his hand. "You didn't forget, my son. You just needed to remember." That night, Tendo couldn't sleep. He walked around the house, thinking of his mother's years of sacrifice, the fruits she sold, the sun she stood under, the tears she never showed. He remembered how he once shouted at her, how he left her alone. The guilt was heavy, pressing on his heart like a stone. In the morning, he called a carpenter to fix her roof and told Nia, "From today, my mother eats with us. She will no longer stay in that room alone." Nia tried to protest, but Tendo looked at her firmly. "If you cannot accept that, then this is not your home," he said. His voice was calm but strong. From that day, everything began to change. Mama Lella's room was repaired and painted bright yellow. Tendo bought her a new bed and blankets. Every evening, he sat with her, listening to her stories of Macondo and his childhood. She would laugh softly and say, "You were always a good boy, Tendo. Your heart just wandered for a while." He smiled and replied, "And now I have found my way back." Each night, before sleeping, Tendo would pass by her room, peeking through the door to see her resting. He no longer saw an old woman. He saw the woman who gave him everything, the one who never gave up on him. The guilt didn't disappear completely, but it turned into love, the kind that stays. And when it rained again, he sat by her side, holding her hand, making sure no drop fell near her. The sun rose over the city, painting the streets in soft orange light. The sound of traffic began to grow, but inside Tendo's house, everything was quiet. He sat by the window, watching people rush to work, holding cups of coffee and briefcases. It was the same routine he had lived for years, always running, always chasing more. But now, the rush no longer made sense. He looked toward his mother's room. She was awake, sitting on her bed, smiling at the morning light. Her hair had turned completely gray, and her hands shook slightly as she folded her blanket. Yet there was peace in her face, the kind that comes from a heart that forgives. Tendo felt a lump in his throat. He stood up, walked to her, and knelt beside her bed. "Mother," he said softly, "I have been thinking." Mama Lella turned to him with gentle eyes. "What is it, my son?" He took a deep breath. "I don't want this city life anymore. I want to go home, back to Macondo." She looked surprised. "Back to the village?" she asked. "But your work, your business?" "I can start again," he said quickly. "But this time, I will start with you by my side." For a moment, she said nothing. Then her eyes filled with tears. "You mean it, Tendo?" He nodded. "Yes, Mother. I have spent too long chasing things that don't matter. I forgot what home felt like. I forgot who I was. I want to go back, to the place where you raised me, where love was real." Mama Lella reached out and touched his cheek. "You have found your way, my son. That is what I prayed for every night." By the next week, Tendo had done something no one expected. He resigned from his high-paying job. His colleagues were shocked. "You're leaving? But you're one of the best," one said. Tendo only smiled. "There are some things more important than money," he replied. He sold his expensive car, packed a few bags, and used the rest of his savings to buy tools and materials for rebuilding his mother's old home. Nia, his wife, chose not to go with them. "I can't live in a village," she said coldly. "You'll regret this." But Tendo just smiled calmly. "Maybe," he said, "but at least I'll live with peace." The journey back to Macondo was long but full of memories. As they drove past dusty roads and green fields, Mama Lella's eyes shone with tears. "I never thought I would see these trees again," she whispered. "They look the same as when you were a boy." When they arrived, villagers came out to see them. Some recognized Tendo immediately. "Ah, Mama Lella's son," they said with excitement. "You have come back. We heard you became a big man in the city." Tendo smiled humbly. "I was lost for a while," he said, "but I came home to find myself again." The old house where he grew up was still standing, but it was weak and broken. The roof had holes, and the walls leaned slightly to one side. Tendo rolled up his sleeves and said, "Let's fix it." Every day, he worked hard, carrying wood, mixing mud, hammering nails. His mother sat under a mango tree, watching him with pride. The same villagers who once whispered about their poverty now came to help. Some brought water, others offered food. Children ran around laughing as Tendo worked. At sunset, when the work was done, he would sit beside his mother, tired but happy. She would hand him roasted maize and say, "You worked hard today, my son. You remind me of your father." He would smile and reply, "I'm learning from you, Mama." Weeks passed, and soon the house was finished. It was simple, just 2 rooms, a clean floor, and a small veranda where they could sit and watch the stars. To Tendo, it was more beautiful than any house in the city. When the villagers came to see the new home, Tendo said proudly, "This is where love lives." Everyone clapped and cheered. The next morning, Tendo woke early, just as he used to when he was young. He helped his mother prepare fruits to sell, oranges, mangoes, and guavas. Together they walked to the market, baskets balanced on their heads. As they reached the market, some people stared. "Isn't that the man from the city?" one woman whispered. "Why is he selling fruits?" Tendo heard them but only smiled. "If people laugh, let them laugh," he said to his mother. "I am proud of you. I am proud of where I come from." Mama Lella's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy. "You came home to me," she whispered. Every day after that, they sold fruits side by side. Customers loved Mama Lella's warm greetings and Tendo's cheerful laugh. The small fruit stand became a place of happiness in the market. Children often came by for free fruit, and Tendo never turned them away. "Take it," he would say with a grin. "My mother used to say a kind heart brings a sweet harvest." Word spread across the village. The once proud city man now worked beside his mother, smiling as if he had everything in the world. People who once mocked them began to admire them. Some even said, "He is a true son." In the evenings, they sat outside their house, watching the sky turn red and gold. The air was full of peace, no car horns, no office calls, no rushing. Just the sound of crickets and laughter. One day, as they sat together, Tendo looked at his mother and said softly, "I used to think you were poor, Mama. But now I know, you were the richest person I ever knew. You gave me love, patience, and strength. No city gold can buy that." Mama Lella smiled, her eyes glistening. "My son, you have learned the true meaning of wealth. It is not in money, it is in love, in kindness, and in knowing where you belong." From that day, Tendo became known in Macondo as a man of change, not because of his money, but because of his heart. He started helping other mothers who sold fruits, teaching their children how to read and count. He used the money he once saved for business to build a small learning hut for the village children. When people asked him why he did it, he would simply say, "Because my mother taught me to share what I have." Years passed, and Mama Lella grew older, but she never stopped smiling. Every morning, Tendo stood beside her in the market, arranging fruits carefully, calling out to customers with joy. When people asked her how she managed to raise such a good son, she would laugh softly and say, "I just prayed and loved him, and God did the rest." On her last birthday, the whole village came to celebrate. They danced, sang songs, and told stories about her kindness. Tendo stood beside her, holding her hand as the sun set behind the hills. She leaned closer and whispered, "You came home to me, my son. That is all a mother ever wants." Tendo kissed her forehead and said, And I will never leave again, Mama." From that day forward, the people of Macondo remembered their story, the story of a mother's love and a son's return. It reminded everyone that no matter how far one goes, the road home is never closed. And under the bright sky of Macondo, where the mango trees swayed gently, Tendo and Mama Lela continued to sell fruits, laugh together, and live with peace. The end.